Your commute is traffic. Theirs is open ocean, 200 kilometers from shore. However, the journey to the rig is statistically more dangerous than the work itself. Why does every offshore crew fly out instead of sail? You're about to find out. Offshore crews run on rotation, 2 to 4 weeks on, 2 to 4 weeks off. Miss a crew change and you get exhausted workers, overstaying shifts, and production gaps bleeding tens of thousands of dollars per hour. Deepwater fields sit 150 to 300 kilometers offshore. The commute is the operational lifeline. Nobody was paying attention to crew transfer logistics back then. The supply vessels did the job, the workers endured the crossing, and the industry moved on. That was about to change. Picture this. You are crammed into the hold of a supply vessel, somewhere in the North Sea. The swell is running 4 to 6 meters. You have been at sea for 9 hours. You have not slept, you cannot eat. Your shift starts in 3 hours, and you have not even reached the rig yet. That was the reality of open ocean crew transfers before the helicopter became the standard. And it was not just uncomfortable, it was genuinely dangerous in ways the industry spent decades trying to minimize. Crew transfer vessels, CTVs, are still used today for near-shore operations. Wind farms within 20 to 30 kilometers of shore, shallow water platforms, coastal infrastructure. In those conditions, a modern CTV is fast, efficient, and practical. But an open ocean crossing to a deepwater field is a completely different calculation. A 200-kilometer sea crossing in a supply vessel takes 8 to 12 hours, depending on weather and sea state. In the North Sea, where conditions can shift violently and without warning, that crossing can become a survival exercise. Workers arrive dehydrated, nauseated, sleep-deprived, and physically battered. And that wasn't even the part that got people angry. The transfer itself, getting from the vessel onto the rig, was where things got truly dangerous. Crane basket transfers were standard practice for decades. A worker climbs into a net cage suspended from a crane, and the crane swings them from the moving deck of the vessel to the fixed platform. In heavy swell, the vessel pitches and rolls while the rig stays fixed. The timing window to make that transfer safely narrows to seconds. Miss it, and you are looking at a crushed limb, a fall into the sea, or worse. Heavy seas could make vessel-to-rig transfers completely impossible. Operations halted, crews were stranded, production stopped. Exhausted workers had no choice but to keep working past their rotation end. You'd think someone would have said something. Nobody did, not for a long time. The industry normalized the misery because there was no obvious alternative. Workers accepted it as part of the job. In the years that followed, the industry would understand exactly what this meant, not just in human terms, but in the cold mathematics of safety incidents, near misses, and fatalities that traced directly back to crew condition on arrival. One safety officer working the North Sea fields in the early era of offshore expansion saw the pattern clearly. He documented the correlation between crossing conditions and incident rates in the first hours of a new shift. Nobody listened. The helicopter did not just improve the offshore commute. It solved 3 separate compounding problems at the same time, and that is why it became untouchable as the primary crew transport for deepwater operations. The first problem was distance. A deepwater field sitting 200 to 300 kilometers offshore is simply beyond the practical range of a crew transfer vessel when you factor in welfare, scheduling, and sea state. A Sikorsky S-92 or an Airbus H-175, the workhorses of offshore helicopter operations, can cover that distance in under an hour. A supply vessel doing the same crossing takes 8 to 12 hours.
There is no version of that comparison where the boat wins for crew transport.
The second problem was time.
Offshore rotations run on tight, interlocking schedules.
When one crew flies out, another flies in. The handover is precise. A crew that arrives on time, rested, and ready to work steps into a briefing and takes over the shift cleanly. A crew that arrives after a 10-hour sea crossing steps into a safety hazard. The helicopter's 45-minute flight window is predictable, repeatable, and schedulable. It replaced an 8 to 12-hour variable with a near constant. That single change restructured how offshore production schedules are built. The third problem was exposure. Every minute a crew spends over open water in a vessel is a minute inside a dangerous weather window. Seas can build fast. A crossing that starts in manageable conditions can turn brutal halfway through. At altitude, a helicopter flies above most of the weather that would stop a vessel cold. A 6-meter swell that grounds a supply vessel operation barely registers for a twin-engine helicopter at 1,500 feet. Less time over water means less exposure to the conditions that make offshore work deadly. Put all three together and the result is this. Helicopters keep the crew change clock running. The production schedule holds. Workers arrive in a state where they can actually do the job safely. The helicopter did not just replace the boat, it eliminated 3 operational vulnerabilities at once. The helicopter became the standard, but it did not arrive without a cost. The North Sea has seen some of the most significant offshore helicopter accidents in aviation history, and each one reshaped the industry that followed. The Chinook crash of 1986 off the Shetland Islands killed 45 people, the deadliest offshore helicopter accident in history at the time. The Super Puma accidents of 2009 and 2013 killed a combined 19 workers and triggered sweeping reviews of aircraft certification, flotation systems, and escape procedures. And then the industry made the one decision that changed everything. It stopped treating crashes as isolated tragedies and started treating them as system failures that demanded system-level responses. Each accident triggered formal investigations by aviation authorities, union pressure campaigns, and regulatory overhaul across the UK, Norway, and the wider international offshore sector. The findings were consistent. Survivability in an offshore helicopter crash depends on training, equipment, and aircraft design, not just pilot skill. A pilot can do everything right and still put a helicopter in the water. What happens next is determined by what the workers are wearing, what they practiced, and how the aircraft is built. The industry response was substantial. Mandatory survival gear became non-negotiable. Weather minimums were tightened. Aircraft flotation systems, sponsons, and airbags that keep a helicopter on the surface long enough for occupants to escape became a certification requirement for offshore operations. Passenger safety briefings were standardized. Escape window designs were overhauled. The helicopter did not become the standard because it was perfect. It became the standard because the industry was forced, through tragedy and regulatory pressure, to make it as survivable as engineering and training could achieve. Before any offshore worker boards a helicopter for the first time, they go through something that most people outside the industry have never heard of. It is called HUET, Helicopter Underwater Escape Training, and it is exactly as intense as it sounds. The training takes place in a purpose-built facility, usually a large pool. Trainees are seated inside a mock helicopter cabin, a steel frame with seats, windows, and harnesses that replicates the interior of the aircraft they will actually fly in. An instructor briefs the sequence. Then, the cage is lowered into the water and rolled upside down. This decision seems small at the time. It wasn't. The moment the cabin inverts and begins to flood, every instinct in the human body screams to move immediately. HUET teaches you to override that instinct. You wait. You let the cabin flood. You let the pressure equalize. Only then do you locate the exit, which you practiced finding with your eyes closed, because the water will be dark and disorienting, and you push it open and get out. The Emergency Breathing System, or EBS, is a small compressed air device that gives the wearer a few additional breaths of air underwater. In a real ditching scenario, those extra breaths can be the margin between escape and drowning.
Workers are trained to use the EBS as part of the escape sequence, not as a panic response. Hewitt certification is not a one-time event. It is renewed regularly, every 4 years in most jurisdictions, with refresher requirements for specific roles. The reason is muscle memory. In a real underwater escape, you will not be thinking clearly. You will be cold, disoriented, and possibly injured. The training is designed so that the escape sequence runs on automatic, not on conscious thought. Muscle memory, not panic, is what saves you. Before a single offshore worker boards a helicopter, they are already wearing their last line of defense. The immersion suit, a full-body, sealed thermal survival suit, goes on before departure. Every flight, no exceptions. The reason is the water. North Sea temperatures run between 5 and 12 degrees Celsius, depending on season. Without thermal protection, a person in that water loses meaningful physical function within minutes. Hypothermia becomes fatal in under 30 minutes in the coldest conditions. That is not enough time for a search and rescue helicopter to reach a ditching site 200 kilometers offshore, locate survivors, and pull them from the water. The immersion suit changes that equation. A correctly worn, fully sealed suit traps body heat, maintains core temperature, and keeps the wearer buoyant and visible. The suits are typically bright orange, internationally recognized as a distress color, and many are fitted with retro-reflective strips and personal locator beacons. A survivor in a properly worn immersion suit has a survival window measured in hours, not minutes. That's the kind of number that makes accountants cry, because the cost of a single fatality, in human and financial terms, dwarfs the cost of every immersion suit the industry has ever purchased. The rules around immersion suits are absolute. The suit must be worn correctly, every seal checked, every zip fully closed before the aircraft departs. A partially sealed suit offers dramatically reduced protection. Workers are trained to don the suit in under 2 minutes because in an emergency boarding scenario, that is all the time available. The immersion suit does not work alone. It is the third layer in a survival system that includes Hewitt training and the emergency breathing system. Each element depends on the others. Hewitt teaches you to escape the aircraft. The EBS gives you air to do it. The immersion suit keeps you alive until rescue arrives. Remove any one layer and the system degrades. For a while, things actually seemed fine. The industry had the suits, had the training, had the equipment. That didn't last, because equipment without enforcement is just inventory. There is a version of offshore helicopter operations that some people imagine, a machine that flies in any weather, on any schedule, because production demands it. That version does not exist. Most people never heard about this part. Offshore helicopters operate under strict weather minimums that are non-negotiable. Wind speed limits, minimum visibility requirements, cloud ceiling heights, all of these are codified in aviation regulations and operator procedures. When conditions fall below minimums, flights are grounded. Full stop. Night flights over open water carry additional requirements. Icing conditions, where supercooled water droplets freeze on rotor blades and airframe surfaces, can make flight dangerous within minutes. Extreme sea states affect landing conditions on the helideck, where the platform itself may be moving in heavy swell. Any one of these factors can ground all flights for a field, regardless of where the crew change schedule stands. The protection of the pilot's authority to make that call is structural. Regulatory frameworks across the UK Civil Aviation Authority, the Norwegian CAA, and international equivalents explicitly protect pilots from commercial pressure to fly in unsafe conditions. Union agreements reinforce that protection. A pilot who refuses a flight on safety grounds cannot be penalized. That line is not a courtesy, it is a hard, legal boundary. The distinction between single-engine and twin-engine aircraft matters enormously at distance. For deep-water operations beyond a defined range threshold, typically around 200 nautical miles from shore in UK regulations, twin-engine aircraft are mandatory. The redundancy of a second engine means that a single mechanical failure does not automatically become a fatal event. The aircraft can continue flying or execute a controlled ditching with time for crew to prepare. The schedule matters on an offshore rig. Every delayed crew change is money. But the rule that governs offshore helicopter operations is simple and absolute. No crew is worth a flight that should not be made. The helicopter did not make the boat obsolete. It just pushed the boat back to the terrain where it actually belongs. Crew transfer vessels remain the standard transport for nearshore offshore wind farms. Projects within 30 to 50 kilometers of shore run CTVs daily, fast, purpose-built catamarans that carry technicians out in the morning and bring them back in the evening. For shallow water platforms and coastal infrastructure, the CTV is efficient, cost-effective, and entirely appropriate. The sea state at those distances is manageable, the crossing times are short, and the welfare impact on workers is minimal. Specific project teams still arrive by supply vessel regardless of distance. Saturation divers travel with their equipment and their living systems, the hyperbaric chambers that allow them to live and work at depth for weeks at a time. Heavy equipment crews bring machinery that cannot be loaded onto a helicopter. Cargo that cannot fly goes by sea. The supply vessel is a permanent fixture in offshore logistics. It just does not carry the primary crew pipeline. The threshold where sea crossing becomes impractical for crew welfare sits somewhere around 80 to 100 kilometers offshore. Beyond that distance, crossing times in realistic sea conditions push past the point where a worker can arrive fit for a 12-hour industrial shift. Scheduling becomes unreliable. Weather windows become too narrow. The welfare calculation tips decisively toward air transport. Crane basket transfers from vessel to rig remain in use for cargo operations and specific project work. They carry significant injury risk in any meaningful swell, and the industry has worked to reduce their use wherever alternatives exist. But they have not disappeared, and they will not disappear, because some work simply requires them. Boats serve the offshore industry every single day. They just cannot serve as the primary crew pipeline for modern deepwater fields, and the industry stopped pretending they could. Pay attention to this next detail because it explains everything. A producing deepwater rig generates between $1 and $5 million per day in output. Every hour that production slips because a crew change was delayed, a shift ran short-handed, or a fatigued worker made a critical error is an hour of revenue that cannot be recovered. A single delayed crew change that costs 4 hours of production at a mid-range field can represent $200,000 in lost output. And no, I'm not making that up. Helicopter charter costs for offshore operations are significant. A twin-engine offshore helicopter running regular crew change rotations costs thousands of dollars per flight hour to operate. Over a year of operations, the total charter bill for a single deepwater field runs into the millions. On paper, that looks like a major expense line. The operator's actual calculation runs the other way. A fatigued crew arriving after a 10-hour sea crossing makes more errors. Errors in an offshore environment, on a drilling floor, in a confined space, around high-pressure equipment, cost money. Sometimes they cost lives. Investigations, shutdowns, regulatory penalties, and insurance consequences from a serious incident can dwarf an entire year of helicopter charter costs in a single event. Helicopter schedules are predictable enough to build production plans around. The crew change window is known days in advance. Shift handovers are clean. The incoming crew is rested, briefed, and ready. That predictability has a dollar value that never appears on a charter invoice, but drives every decision an operator makes. The helicopter is not a luxury. It is the cheapest insurance policy the offshore industry has ever purchased. The math is settled. The North Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, the fields off West Africa and Southeast Asia. Every deepwater operator runs the same calculation and lands in the same place. Offshore workers survive because the industry built a system around their survival. Subscribe so you never miss the next one.